Unscripted. PTC's Unscripted series brings playwrights, audiences, and the imagination together. Playwrights Theater Center. PTC is a theater company that finds, nurtures, and advances creators of vision and passion, supporting new plays from creation to performance. New and necessary stories take shape. Fresh ways of working, thinking, and creating emerge. What are the Frontliners? The Frontliners is set in Vancouver, BC 2016. It is late January, and Canada is in the throes of resettling the first wave of 25,000 Syrian refugees. As three frontline workers battle Vancouver's housing crisis to move families out of an East Van hotel, their lives are brought together in ways that irreversibly shape them. The Frontliners is a new work written by Zahida Rahemtulla. The play is part of PTC's new Play and Development Prize, which provides dramaturgical support and mentorship in theater producing, along with a presentation opportunity for fall 2022. Join us in the conversation. We want to hear from you live. Tell us what you think about Unscripted. Sign in to your YouTube or Google accounts in order to participate in our live chat. Or take your time to compose your thoughts and then complete our survey we'll send you after the event. Unscripted. PTC's Unscripted series brings playwrights, audiences, and the imagination together. Playwrights Theater Center. PTC is a theater company that finds, nurtures, and advances creators of vision and passion, supporting new plays from creation to performance. New and necessary stories take shape. Fresh ways of working, thinking, and creating emerge. What are the Frontliners? The Frontliners is set in Vancouver, BC 2016. It is late January, and Canada is in the throes of resettling the first wave of 25,000 Syrian refugees. As three frontline workers battle Vancouver's housing crisis to move families out of an East Van hotel, their lives are brought together in ways that irreversibly shape them. The Frontliners is a new work written by Zahida Rahemtulla. The play is part of PTC's new Play and Development Prize, which provides dramaturgical support and mentorship in theater producing, along with a presentation opportunity for fall 2022. Join us in the conversation. We want to hear from you live. Tell us what you think about Unscripted. Sign in to your YouTube or Google accounts in order to participate in our live chat. Or take your time to compose your thoughts and then complete our survey we'll send you after the event.
Asiem Nesiea, Anthemary Point, Tenits nach Quomatquium, Amit Sep Quatquilum. Honoring you, Zahida, with the language of my ancestors, I said, my name is Mary Point, and I'm from Musqueam, and I welcomed you to our community. This right here, Ia Ta'i, we are in Musqueam. Years ago, when visitors, newcomers, would come to the area, we would welcome them. We would welcome them and ask them if they're coming with good intentions, and we would share a little about who we are with our visitors. Your play has great meaning to me because it's about welcoming newcomers. For me, when I think about your play, I think about our ancestors welcoming newcomers to the shore. I also am very mindful that it's one of the calls to action in Truth and Reconciliation, and that is to welcome newcomers. Truth and reconciliation begins with truth. And so it's important that all newcomers know our whole history. As I stand before you today, I'm wearing an orange shirt. This orange shirt is for many of my relatives who never came home from residential school. Those children were taken away from their families, and while at school, they didn't know what was happening. They died alone, feeling unloved, and were put in the ground without family and without ceremony. And so I'll continue to wear orange to remember them. When I think about our children, I also think about Indigenous children, people of the land across the globe, who are also being displaced by visitors, by industry, by politics, by war, by climate. And I'm so glad that someone like you was here to welcome people properly in the way that they should be welcomed. With that in mind, I want to share a song with you. This song comes from my great uncle Dominic Point. His traditional name is Tiaktat. This song is a song that we sing when we're paddling into a new community to let people know that we're coming with good intentions. It's also a song that we would sing standing on our shores to share a little of our culture. It's a song that we sing for every new beginning, a new journey, a graduation, a wedding, a funeral. And in this great time of learning, I can think of no better time to sing it than for the beginning of your play as the world gets to see it. Zahida, I'm so happy to be here with you, and I'm honored to stand with you for the launch of your play. In our culture, when we want to thank someone for lifting us up, as you are doing, we raise our hands. I raise my hands to you, Haichka, for your good work.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. And I would also like to state my intention on being on these lands today. And my intention is to tell a story about forced displacement, and specifically the workers who settle forcibly displaced peoples on this land on which so many were also forcibly displaced. My dad found refuge on these lands as a forcibly displaced person, and my mother was an immigrant here. And as an offering, I brought some prayer beads. We call it a tasbih, and this especially reminds me of my grandfather, my late grandfather. And he was quite a religious person, and but this tasbih, it reminds me also whenever I leave this land and go somewhere else, I bring a tasbih with me because I feel like it connects me to my ancestors, And so I bring this as an offering to you, and also as a way to connect my ancestors to you.
Haichka, Zahida, this is very beautiful. And it does remind me of words from my great, great, great ancestor, Keapulana, who was here when the visitors first arrived, the Spanish and the English. And it was a time of unsettlement for a lot of our community members as they look to welcome these newcomers in all of their new ways. But what he said to us is, don't forget who you are, and don't forget who we are. And to me, that means that it's important to remember who we are and where we come from, to connect to our culture and our family because they all stand with us. But we're also standing together in this community and we're walking forward together. So I thank you for this precious gift, and I will think of your grandfather also, and you with great fondness. Haichka.
Thank you.
Salamat. My name is Davey Samuel Calderon. My pronouns are he, him, and identify as a man of Filipino descent and also queer, with short bleached hair and a stocky build, and I'm wearing a color block sweater of green, black, and burnt orange. And we're live streaming live here in the Progress Lab studio, and we're on a set of 2 chairs with pink cushions and wooden frames, a little wooden table in the middle with a plant on it. And it's all on this wonderful rug, mostly red, but a lot of different other colors and flower motifs. And we're surrounded by tubes of LED lights that are shining bright orange on us and a sign that says PTC. And welcome to Unscripted, the Frontliners with Zahida.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zahida Rahemtulla. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a South Asian woman with black shoulder-length curly hair, and I'm seated in the same wonderful area here that Davey just described, and I'm the playwright of the Frontliners.
Davey here. So this play captures a particular moment in Canadian/Turtle Island history, when after 5 years of multi-sided civil war, violent conflict, and proxy war within Syria, which grew out of the Arab Spring and led to the forced displacement of millions, more than half the country's population. So, in 2016, Canada had committed to opening its borders to 25,000 Syrian refugees. And this major settlement project relied on workers from across the nation to welcome newcomers in temporary accommodation sites across the country and then settle them into permanent homes. This was followed by many more supports and services to ensure the comfortability of these newcomers to these lands. So, frontline settlement workers are the first people that newcomers meet, and their extraordinary work goes beyond what is expected. And this is beyond before 2016, during now, and even now that frontline workers' work is never over. Zahida, as a frontline settlement worker who assisted Syrian folks in Vancouver and a talented playwright, can you speak a little bit to this, how you wanted to tell the stories of these frontline workers, the stories of newcomers, and essentially the story of this historical moment?
Sure, yeah. I think one thing I really wanted to do with this play is to write about the things we don't see. And the Frontlines are this space we maybe didn't think about as much in this huge and highly publicized resettlement. But at the same time, the Frontlines are such a complex place and a place with so much humor and so much intensity, especially during this period that we're going to talk about. And it's a place I was lucky to be on during this time. But beyond capturing this moment in history from a perspective less heard from, I also wanted to dive into some of the complexities that come to life in the sector, like complexities within groups of color, complexities within different groups of refugees, differences in life experiences of first and second generation Canadian settlers here, and to try to add nuance to conversations that I think can sometimes be oversimplified or put under the same frames. So I also wanted to look carefully at some of these contemporary recurring issues, and I found the chaos and humor and surprise of the frontliners and all the different kinds of characters that you can find there, the perfect place to do that. And before we go on with this live stream, I just want to take a quick moment to say thanks, starting with the Playwrights Theatre Centre. I think a model like this that brings a new play to the stage is really important to our ecology in theatre in terms of bringing new playwrights through to production, which is an aspect I know many new playwrights, not just me, struggle with once we have a draft ready. So models like this are so helpful, and PTC also has a really strong community engaged process. So everyone at PTC, Heidi Taylor, usual suspect of support for me, and many playwrights, Joanna Garfinkel, Belinda, Melanie, and Maria Zarillo, who's with us now, our talented digital producer who has been such a key piece of bringing this event together, our really beloved stage manager, Olivia Ete. And since this event is live, we've had a really hardworking team of videographers who are with us now, making sure all of this hopefully goes as planned. I also want to thank Mohammed Shaheen and the Silk Road Institute, Company Theatre, and the Arts Club Theatre Company Emerging Playwrights Unit, where I wrote my first draft of this play with Stephen Drover and Ashley Corcoran. Also, the cultural consultants, Farouk Al-Seji, Majid Aiga, and Osaima Kanberia, who you'll see tonight, and as always, my family. The full list of all the people and institutions who have supported this play are available on the event page. Finally, and most of all, I really want to thank the person sitting next to me. I don't know how Davey does all the things he does, but these past weeks he's been managing many details of this event while dramaturging this play, while also helping others in the theater community. Well, also what he didn't say, he actually directed the excerpts of the play of the excerpts you're going to see of this play tonight. So I told Davey I don't think he sleeps. But anyways, the point is my big thank you to the person beside me. And finally, thank you to all of you folks watching this live stream and sharing your precious Friday night real estate with us.
Thanks, Zahida. We're just Davey speaking. We're just so glad to have you here. I also just want to acknowledge Mary Point, who did the traditional Musqueam welcome with Zahida that you just saw. And the play represents newcomers, and both of us who are children of immigrants, we're really grateful for Mary for breaking down why it's so important to do these protocols of welcome with the nations whose lands we're on. So again, thank you, Mary and Musqueam Nation. Okay, some housekeeping as usual. So if you're new to an unscripted live stream, this is how it works. Today we have a really jam-packed program with both live and pre-recorded works. So first, the things that are recorded are things like live interview, including pre-recorded interviews with guest speakers who have been part of the 2016 Syrian settlement project in Canada, but in different ways. This includes Gulalai Habib, currently the Director of Settlement and Integration Burnaby, Bal Brach, award-winning journalist, and Osaima Kanberia, who's a cultural consultant on this project, a journalist and a media creator. And we have shot some really amazing excerpts to bring the play to life through some film stage readings. Zahida mentioned Gabriel Cifuentes, who tirelessly edited and shot those. And also we have sound design by Heather Kemsky with our actors. And we're live, and part of that is contributing to the live chat. And we have questions for you, the audience, about some of the things that we're exploring in tonight's live stream. So our chat moderator, Andy, is going to drop some questions in the chat, and we really hope you will participate and contribute to the discussion that will happen there. In order to contribute to the chat, make sure that you're logged on to your YouTube and Google account. And also, please respect our community guidelines. So yeah, feel free to add to the discussion. And some of those comments may be highlighted during tonight's live stream. And then finally, make sure to use that hashtag the Frontliners and hashtag Unscripted and hashtag PTC if you're sending out any social media about tonight's event. Our tags are PTC Playwrights on Instagram, at Playwrights Theater on Facebook, and at PTC_Playwrights on Twitter. If you need any support while you watch the stream, you can also DM our chat mod, Andy, or on the chat it says PTC Tube. So Zahida, would you like to introduce the first thing we'll be watching?
Sure. Yes. So we'll start off with a short scene from the Frontliners, which features Omar, who's played by Mustafa Shaker, and Yusuf, played by Tom Pickett, two frontliners stationed at Hotel Splendid East Vancouver. The team is under a lot of pressure as the government has just announced a 5-day pause on flights of Syrian refugees waiting to board planes to Canada because workers aren't able to find families' homes fast enough. Yusuf, a 57-year-old man that identifies as an Eritrean Kenyan immigrant living in Vancouver for the last 33 years, has worked in this job for the last 17 of those, and he's showing Omar, a 26-year-old man who identifies as Syrian Palestinian and arrived in 2014, who is new to the organization, The Ropes.
And Davey speaking. Short disclaimer that we're just starting to work with cultural consultants in the play's development, so we acknowledge that we're still working on appropriate local dialects and accents for these characters. So thank you for your patience.
Enjoy the Frontliners part of scene 1.
Now, in terms of housing, just wait, please. I know everyone wants to know, and we're in the process of solving that challenge. But in the meantime, just wait, please. In the meantime, Vancouver needs a pause. So we're stopping the planes.
What about all the families waiting, Minister?
I'm getting there. And well, the truth is, we don't really know how long these families will be waiting in hotels. The families are just larger than we expected. But I am assured these settlement agencies, they're very professional. Devoted their whole lives to looking after refugees, after all.
How long?
5 days. We stopped the planes for 5 days. There's simply no room at hotels anymore. Agencies can find families already here, homes in that time, and we can resume bringing in people after that. What I am told, at least, is this is all going to be resolved in the next few days.
Put the donations here.
That was Immigration Minister McCallum announcing a 5-day pause on Syrian arrivals tomorrow until the last week of January as refugee agencies struggle to find homes in Vancouver's notoriously difficult housing market. McCallum insists the pause won't affect thousands of Syrian refugees waiting to board flights from Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan, and that the Liberal government is still definitely on track to fulfill its promise of bringing in 25,000 refugees by March. In other news, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's hair once again received significant international attention after a summit.
Don't listen to the headlines. They just make you more stressed. I'll tell you everything you need to know. Yes? Hi, Miss Craigslist? Miss Craigslist, yeah. You had a listing for a 2-bedroom, correct, yeah? I'm calling from UNS, United Newcomer Services. Just of course, yes. Well, they're not that big a family. Well, yes, mother and grandmother, so 2, and 3, or 4, or 5, or perhaps 11 children. Are you still there? 2 bedrooms, we know they don't mind. Wait, we also have a family of 2, plus 8 children. Wait, how about 3? Please, Miss don't. It's all about the framing, you see.
Yes, sir.
Say refugee too quick and people get cautious.
Cautious.
Talk too much about government rent money and they get, well, you know how some people get. Tell them 11 children right after you say good morning, son, you'll give someone a heart attack. So you say 3, hold, plus 8, 2, hold, plus 9.
2 hold plus 3. Times 3. We can multiply.
You must always ease into things. I knew you would pick up fast. So what have we here? Families at Hotel Splendid.
Davey here, speaking live. I hope you enjoyed that scene, and I promise you there's another one you'll see later on this evening. Before we introduce our wonderful speaker coming up, Gululai Habib, here's a question for you folks to think of. It's already in the chat. And the question is, what do you know about the 2016 Syrian Settlement Project? Again, what do you know about the 2016 Syrian Settlement Project?
Thanks, Davey. Zahida here. As everyone thinks of their answers, I'd like to introduce you to our very special guest, Gululai Habib, someone who has been a frontline settlement worker for years, and her experience settling not only Syrian refugees, but many refugees and immigrants over the past decades, bringing her own lived experience as a former refugee to her work. Her words and insights are so valuable to us. I met Gululai working on the Frontlines in 2016. She was a key piece of the whole resettlement project at this time. After working many years as a frontline worker herself, Gululai served as a crucial person at this time between the frontline workers and the upper management, and saw this project from many different vantage points. She is well loved in the sector amongst frontline workers because she has always advocated for frontline workers and the lived experiences many bring. So we hope you enjoy this interview with Gululai. Zahida here, and with me is Gululai Habib, our special guest of Unscripted, who has devoted many years of her life to resettlement and is well known and well loved in the frontline sector community for her work and support of workers and families, and her courage on the sector as well. She has started the careers of many frontline workers, and so a really warm welcome to Gululai, who we're really lucky who could join us today.
Thank you.
I'll pass it to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Zahida. My name is Gululai Habib, and I identify my pronouns as she and her, and I identify myself as a refugee settler on this unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh. I also identify myself as a woman of color, despite my complex of white complex and blue-green eyes, but because of the history of my own marginalization and displacement as an Afghan refugee woman.
Thank you. Let's start with the first question. So the play looks at the experience of frontline workers who also came as immigrants and refugees. I know you came as a refugee to Canada and joined the Frontlines and started the careers of many other migrants who joined the sector. What is the story of how you first joined the Frontlines, and what has your journey been?
Yes, I came with my own journey of migration. Before coming to Canada, I worked with United Nations for 12 years with more community engagement initiatives in South Asia and Central Asia. But since my arrival in mid-1999 in Canada as a refugee woman, in my third month, I started to work as a frontline settlement worker, settlement counselor, and then this was a time of very interesting period of the refugees Canada were accepting many refugees, and Afghan refugees were on top of the high number of arrivals. And then I move on from the frontline, many years of frontline, to coordination and mid-level management position. And right now my vision is more community-centered engagement, a vision for settlement. And I had the pleasure to work with many frontline workers from across the world.
Absolutely. And I know that you were also, over the many decades, like a small part of those years, or a small part of that time was also during 2016, when you were a really key piece of the Syrian refugee resettlement project and very key piece in working with a lot of the frontline workers. And so I was wondering what your memories of the Syrian resettlement project back in 2016 are and what some of the challenges and triumphs on the front lines were during that time.
Yes, absolutely. That time I guess none of us will forget. This was a very special time, a very unique time of our life and a rewarding time, but a messy time as well. I think it was 2015, another similar October-November election time, federal election. And this time was also the election promise was 25,000 arrival of Syrian refugees. So the liberals went and the election promise was there. And we were basically hearing almost 2 weeks' notice for the arrival of hundreds per week, while our annual target was between 800 to 1,000 arrival per year. So it was definitely a very, very active, messy period. Hard work. Everybody worked very, very hard. I remember I would have almost 9 to 10 interviews per day, going through hundreds of resumes, 9 to 10 interviews, like half an hour interview. Yeah. The next day was a little training, a half-day training, and they thought everybody was on the job. So the work of the front line was absolutely a remarkable part of the success of the Syrian refugees. Certainly a messy period, but people were saved, life was saved, and many, many refugees arrived. And the first arrival of refugees from Aleppo, in general, we had families with large, almost 6, 7 children per family, very fresh scars of war, very highly traumatized refugees, and low literacy at that time for the first group of arrival. But when the operation expanded from one site to almost 6, 7 sites, in each site had its own team, definitely the model of building on some of the experienced settlement case managers to moving them on to the coordination and the new staff being involved. But the front line were going through layers of challenges, multiple challenges. It was a very much stressful job. You will be dealing with a new team that they didn't know each other. And then while serving the newcomer refugees with multiple issues of barriers, family disconnection, and the issue of family reunification, loved ones were left behind, and people were highly traumatized. There were every minute of dealing with issues and layers of conflict. But the front line worked very, very hard. The front line, that's why this word is very much touching my heart, because it was people like you, Zahida, and other frontliners who made this a success for sure. But at the same time, frontliner was highly underpaid, unappreciated, undervalued, I believe. And their work was not taking the media's attention because they were too busy serving the new refugees.
And we're back, and this is Davey speaking. Welcome back. Some of you answered our first question, which was, what do you know about the 2016 Syrian settlement project? Some of the really interesting comments were ones from Heidi Taylor that says, I hosted the Syrian father and daughter for social activities for a few months. Their claim wasn't successful, and they had to split up and try again as individuals. They didn't stay in touch. And also, Sandy Johnson says, refugees come with great hope and face many challenges. And I think that's really interesting, because I think there was an assumption back then that they were all coming from the same channel, but that's not really true, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Both of these comments, I think, talk about, again, what's not always seen. And Davey and I, during the break, were discussing how not all the refugees, so in this play highlights the 25,000 which Canada committed as government-assisted, but then there was also privately sponsored refugees, and then in the case of asylum claims, refugee claimants who come hoping, but without any guarantee. And then with a second comment, I think that's so true as well. That's what's unseen. There's a lot of focus when people first came, when folks first came, And then even in our interview with Bal, which you'll see, Davey and I, she talks about how it was harder for her to repitch or to say, like, now, can I follow what happened with that family that I met back in 2016? So I think those are really interesting comments that bring us to things that, again, we don't see.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Bal and Oisama?
Yes. So actually, next, that leads us to our interview with Bal Brach and Usaima Kanberia. Both are journalists, but each of them had different roles in connecting with Syrian refugees. Bal was a journalist in the CBC newsroom, and she was actually at these sites interviewing at this time. And Usaima was working as a cultural translator and then making media featuring newcomers.
That's great. Davey here, yes. And they zoomed in with us. Bal from Vancouver and Oisama from Montreal to talk about the role of news and media when covering the settlement event and the stories of Syrian newcomers.
I'm Bal Brach. I'm a journalist based in Vancouver. I use the pronouns she, her. Right now I am in my home office wearing a black sweater, a gold necklace, with a white backdrop behind me, white walls.
Yeah, my name is Usaima Camberier, and I use the pronoun she, her. I'm based in Montreal. I was born in Syria, and I've been living here almost all my life since the age of 8. So currently I am in my home office in Montreal. Now I have a lot of things that surround me, and I'm not doing it only for the show. It's actually my day-to-day background. I have a lot of plants around me. I have a lot of books. I have a bookshelf next to me, and books in Arabic and Spanish and French and English. I love languages, and I also have a what looks like a guitar in the background, but it's actually a oud, the Middle Eastern instrument, string instrument, and I use it for decor. I do not play the oud. I wish I could play it, but it's a challenging instrument.
And Bal, how about you in terms of your journey in journalism?
Yeah, so I quit a staff job at CBC about 7-8 years ago and went freelance. Started my own little production company, did a documentary that was commissioned by CBC. I just felt like some of the work that I was doing as a journalist wasn't really reflective of my own community as a South Asian. And so I've been working on those stories in my own capacity, but I still love journalism and I still love storytelling. So I maintain a freelance relationship with CBC. So I've done special projects like the Syrian refugee resettlement program. When Syrian refugees were coming to Canada, I spent about 4 or 5 months following their stories for CBC News in Vancouver. And so really just being able to delve into stories, because general news, which I did for most of my career, is quite challenging, where you get a story in the morning and by the end of the day you're done and it's on the 6 o'clock news. You really don't feel like you get much beyond just surface reactionary news and reporting. So projects like that and a documentary I've done on Indian weddings, things like that give me a chance to really delve into some of the stories that I want to tell. I am all about that. So when I heard about Zahida's play, I was like, if I can offer any of my experiences and insight, I am happy to share that.
Amazing. I think that's a great segue into talking about 2016 with the Syrian settlement project that happened here in Canada. Both of you, as your experience as journalists, what was your experience of that?
I'll just say from Vancouver, where thousands of Syrian refugees arrived, and then they went to different parts of BC and across the Lower Mainland as well. Initially, it was such fanfare, such a great thing for Canadians to be opening their homes and their hearts, and that was the narrative as it started, at least. And when you look at the resources that CBC dedicated to pull the reporter off and put them, 2 of us, actually, me and a colleague, to do this for several months, they realized that this was going to change the shape of some of our communities and change the shape of people's lives for decades. So there was a lot of interest and fanfare in the beginning, and then you saw, as the challenges arose, housing being a major issue, unaffordability for somebody who's born and raised in Vancouver is hard enough. So imagine newcomers. What a shock beyond just the culture shock, the affordability problem. And then there was a lot of support depending on whether they were, government sponsored through that or privately sponsored. The supports ended at some point, and some of our storytelling only went so far. And so to follow them 3 years later, 4 years later, that to me would be the real test of whether this was a successful endeavor from our government's perspective. But I haven't seen that continuous coverage on a mainstream media basis, which I think is sort of a reflection of where we are today in news too.
Actually, I'm smiling a lot because I can reflect a lot on what Belle has been saying since the beginning, from her experience as a journalist at the CBC in a newsroom up until now. She's shared with us so far with her experience covering the 2016 resettlement program. Now, as far as my experience is concerned, it's actually twofold. Now, I did cover stories about refugees, but not necessarily when they first came, because I had a different role when they first came. Myself, I am a freelancer. I'm no longer affiliated with any news outlet. I freelance for many outlets, so that gives me a lot of freedom to wear many hats. Whereas when you are a full-time, let's say, staff, you are a little bit more limited. I think, Bal, you understand what I'm talking about. So that's why when the refugee crisis in 2016 came, I was a freelancer. I had my own production company, so I could have the liberty to do other things. So my role was to be mainly a translator and a cultural interpreter for the influx of Syrian refugees. Being Syrian myself and understanding, of course, and speaking Arabic fluently, not just Arabic, but also the Syrian Arabic, because there are many dialects. So my role was definitely more important then as a cultural interpreter than actually as a journalist, from my perspective at least. So I saw the Syrian refugees coming firsthand, literally when they first stepped, when they stepped out of the plane, came to the airport in a special section only for those refugees. And I saw a wide range of people. It was actually surreal. Like, I felt I was on a different planet in the sense that, yes, these were my people. They came from my country. I mean, they came from probably, either Jordan or Turkey, whatnot. But I mean, they are Syrians, and they all have lived a war that I did not live. So there was a lot of mixed emotions. At the same time, being a cultural interpreter and also a translator, just like being a journalist, you have to be neutral in your approach. So even though you had a personal connection to these people, you still need to, maintain, and even if you're emotional, you should not show, of course. So that was a little bit challenging for me. And I saw firsthand how, first of all, I was amazed at how organized everything was. I think Trudeau government did an excellent job at really resettling all these people in a very short amount of time. So at the same time, I think, just like Paula has mentioned, I think whether it's a success story or not, we just really need to wait a couple of years and look back and reflect on that and see how are they doing today. Because at the beginning, everyone sort of starts more or less on the same level, but it's just a couple of years later that you realize, okay, this is interesting. Okay, this is how they're succeeding. This is how they're building their lives. This is how, not, right? A lot of them want to go back, some left, etc. So this is it's something that is definitely interesting to look at.
So this question is for Bal. I actually remember you coming into the hotels and being really active during this time. And so we're wondering, what were some of the challenges as a journalist you had while reporting on the lives of the families coming in, navigating also the public responses to those stories and the comments, also the demands of the newsroom, and then the chaos in these temporary sites since everything was happening quite quickly, including the journalist response. So yeah, we're wondering about all of that chaos and challenge.
There was a lot of challenges because we're doing these stories. So part of it is here's a story that I'm telling. It's about, here's this family brought in by this church. Today we're going to go meet them as they get their new apartment. And so that was the story that I had to deliver for 6 o'clock. But the things happening behind the scenes were I'm putting all these pieces together to the puzzle. And I'm like, wow, so the government is getting this great publicity job from us doing these stories about how great it is that we've let tens of thousands of refugees in, but there's such chaos at these hotels. There's such chaos with people trying to figure out housing and how they're going to get here. And once that runs out, where do they go? Like, there was so much disorganization behind the scenes. And this is not to speak to anybody on the ground, because everybody on the ground was doing the best they can with whatever they were given. But on a higher level, I'm like, how could our government bring such a flood of people in without having a proper plan in place? So that was what we tried to push for certain stories. And so that was some of the bigger stuff of like, I really wanted to, I wish we could have held the government to a higher account when it came to what was the plan and did it work out? How are we judging whether this is successful or not, other than all these positive, heartwarming stories of families not having to think about bombs and etc. Like, that's fine, but you also have a responsibility and a moral obligation. If you're bringing all of these people here, you have to have a plan for them to do well and succeed, you know?
And we're back live. This is Davey speaking. And wow, such a great beginning to the conversation. And you'll hear more from Gulalai, Baal, and Oizaima later in tonight's program. And I actually want to start you off with the second question for you to answer tonight. And that question is, what are things you discovered or made assumptions about in regards to the 2016 Syrian settlement project? Now that you've heard some things from all of our guest speakers, what are things you discovered or made assumptions about in regards to the 2016 Syrian settlement project? And he's going to drop that question in the chat. So Zahida, would you like to introduce the next scene?
Yes, Zahida speaking. And the next thing you'll see is an excerpt from the second scene of the play, where you'll be introduced to our third character, Nadia, who's played by Sabrina Villani, who identifies as a 22-year-old second-generation woman of Bangladeshi descent, born in Vancouver, and whose job it is to find houses for families. This is her first job after she graduates, and she's about to meet Omar and Yusuf on this first stressful one of the 5-day government-ordered plane pause.
My phone's been off the hook. Omar, I am at a gas station. Had to translate what kind of cigarettes he wanted. Omar, we're lost. I was like a GPS last night. Omar, I don't know what I'm doing in Canada actually. Omar, I need a house.
Need a house?
Yeah.
Oh my God, need a house?
Yeah.
You see, you become a 24-hour helpline for 32 families. Change that number soon, my boy. And no one knows we do this kind of stuff, by the way. Not getting into any overtime, you getting me?
I don't mind.
Where did you say your family was again?
Syria.
But which city in Syria?
Aleppo.
Aleppo. You came here without them.
I had to leave fast.
Same like me, son. Same like me. I was probably your age when I came into that Les Trudeau, actually. Everyone made a big fuss about him, too.
Yeah, pretty good.
Good genes, I would say.
Hi, I'm Nadia. You must be Yusuf.
Omar, nice to meet you.
Indeed, we've been waiting for you, my dear. Who gave you those donations?
My friends at UBC Humanitarian Alliance, they want to help the refugees.
No more donations. We can't handle any more donations. Didn't you get the suspension on donations?
Sorry.
It's not your fault. Did you come from the main office?
Yeah, I was in the hotel all morning though. Carol said to talk to each family about housing. So crazy in the hallways out there. Did you guys know there's a family of 10 people here?
Of course, Hamza's.
And so many families of 8? Oh, you have it all here.
You've been at the main office all week?
Yeah, training. It's good to finally meet you guys.
Do you speak Arabic?
Kind of. Fusha, formal Arabic. I studied it in school.
Where are you from, Nadia?
Abbotsford. But my parents immigrated from Bangladesh.
Where did you study Arabic?
In the States.
Where in the States?
At Princeton.
Princeton, like the fancy
Ivy
one.
League.
Yeah, I got a scholarship. I'm not rich or anything like that.
So what did you find?
Basically, I went around and filled these out. Family name, number of kids, government rental amount, special needs, and comments.
And?
pretty straightforward, except the comments part, because then people were like, I want to live next to this guy and that guy, but definitely not that guy, and near this halal shop or school. And one guy said he wants to live near any library. And a lot of them have heard things, bad things about Surrey, apparently, from this Syrian barber somewhere in the city who, like, warns people about stuff while he cuts their hair, I think.
I see. Interesting.
Yeah, lots of rumors about Surrey. Price-wise, it's most realistic, though, and literally everyone's against basement suites.
What did they say about Surrey?
I don't know, couldn't understand everything exactly.
Okay, so I don't know how much they caught you up at main office, but all the planes, we stopped for 5 days and are gonna have to move fast, starting now, especially with families that have been here more than a month. You need to move the Nasirs first so we can empty those rooms.
The Nasirs.
Family of 13 on the second floor.
There's a family of 13 here?
Have you not seen them on the news?
Stop with them. We need to welcome people to Canada, not Hotel Splendidy's van. Kids that should be in school are running around unsupervised on that silly football pitch out there.
In the parking lot, right? I think I passed it. They're using hotel furniture as goalposts.
I just dismantled it this afternoon. These kids, they put it up again.
The sooner you move people out, the less we will be running around dismantling soccer pitches and trying to keep everyone off the news.
Pretty much.
Yes, so Nadia, go.
Oh, okay, so you said you want me to start with a family of like 13?
Exactly.
Is there any like small families I could start with? Because on Craigslist, 2 bedrooms or more what like those government welfare rates can buy, you know? Any families of like 2, 3 here? 4?
Well, there is the Abu Bakr family, 8. Or you can do the Asads.
He's just 6 people.
And the kids are small. So basically, some half people if she says it properly. Right, Yusuf? And there are these 3 families of 4 here, but we don't need you to focus on them right now. They've been here less time.
Here's the welfare chart for families. So, for a couple and 4 children, you're looking at $750.
Dollars?
No sense.
What?
No, Syrian liras, Nadia.
You said you visited everyone.
What?
You visited all the families.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's just my first job, you know, and I had no idea families would be this big. And at the main office, they also said we need to move fast because of the whole pause thingy. It's just, I can barely find a place for myself to move out of my parents' house, you know? I don't know how I'm going to do that for like 31 families.
32 now, actually.
32. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. Sorry, so many people waiting for rooms to be empty, to get on the planes and everything. Yeah, whoa, sorry. Your phone. Is that Trudeau's dad?
Good genes, we were saying. He thinks he's handsome, I don't know.
Yeah, he's good, very good. We thought, both of us.
Oh, you guys were appreciating him. Thanks. Well, I better go get started, I guess. Lots of...
Yeah.
Okay, then, bye.
She seems okay.
Did you say she just graduated? Must be like my age.
Do you guys know how to say pregnant in Arabic?
Hamil.
Thanks. One of the moms on the 3rd floor was trying to tell me that, I think. Well, bye.
She thinks?
And we're back live with Davey and Zahida. This is Davey speaking. Wow, that was such an amazing scene. I chuckled a bit as I was watching it. And we actually have another little thing we've brought to life in the script coming up. Do you want to describe it, Zahida?
So next you'll be listening to a short clip of a radio interview featured in this play, tying into how news and media played a role in how Canadians perceived this resettlement project. Sound design, once again, from the wonderful Heather Kemsky.
Back to me, Davey speaking. And after that, we're actually going to go directly into part 2 of our interview with Bal and Oizayama. As you experience these segments with a focus on news and media, also consider this question for you in the chat. How much did you rely on news and media to learn about what was happening in 2016? How much did that influence your perception of newcomers? Again, how much do you rely on news and media to learn about what was happening in 2016? And how much of that influenced your perception of newcomers? And put your answers in the chat. And if you're like, oh, I want to think about it more, you could also put your answers in the survey that'll be emailed to you afterwards. Anyways, we'll meet soon.
And it's day 3 of the pause on flights. We're opening up our lines again. We have Gisela on the line in Vancouver.
Yes, hi. So, I'm just saying, everyone's stuck at these hotels, Shelley. Let me tell you, poor things. They're so bored. I mean, we tried last week to go in and teach people bingo, but English, you know? So we tried to teach everyone English so we could play bingo with them, etc. But I guess I'm really just wondering how long this is all gonna go on for.
Thank you, Gisela. I think we're all wondering that. And we have Tom on the line in Coquitlam.
What I'm wondering is, whose idea was it to bring people to Vancouver anyways? Has the Prime Minister not heard of our housing crisis? And how much are these stays at hotels costing, Shelley?
Thank you, Tom. You're listening to Now on CBC. We'll open up the lines again, but first to Hotel Splendid, a site where not a single Syrian family has moved. We met the Nassers in the parking lot where kids at this hotel have set up a soccer pitch to keep busy and from being cooped up through the delays, unable to start school until they find homes. We spoke to the 11 Nasser children. Yes, you heard that right. A football team of their own through a translator.
There was just that discussion about all those challenges covering on the news side, and a lot of that, like the misinformation that was going out, and also a lot of negative portrayal of these newcomers. And so from your insights from Syrian newcomers back in 2016 on how Canadian news and media portrayed them, and newcomer settlers at that time, can you talk a little bit about that? And how does that contrast with their personal experience contrasting to the actual public story coming out on the news?
In terms of people's reactions, I think it was a mixture of both the negativity and positivity. But at the beginning, I honestly, I felt like a big wave of love, really, and generosity coming from the public. Now, one thing I wish I had seen more of was the cultural sensitivity training, especially with the frontline workers. Again, with a short period of time, there wasn't a lot of, I guess, opportunity for front workers to really be prepared for what they're about to, I guess, deal with, or the stories that they're about to hear, etc. So that's a different story, and I think it's something that we don't hear enough about. And I'm glad you tackled it some way somehow, Zahida, in your play. I think it's a very important perspective, because when it comes to historical events such as the 2016 Syrian refugee settlement, we only focus on the refugees, right? But there's also so many other aspects that are also as important. And Bal, I'm glad you mentioned that, also yourself, you're going through a lot personally, etc. And sometimes, like, you didn't want to bring this home, but you still did. And I can definitely relate to that. As my role as an interpreter, well, I had to sit with social workers who would ask difficult questions to refugees who've gone through horrors. And yes, you bring this with you, and on top of it, personally, as a Syrian myself, there's some sort of a guilt a little bit as well for not, sharing that experience with them at the same level, right? But nonetheless, I think, I think we still experience PTSD, but differently. And I think it's very important to recognize that as well, right? And you as a journalist as well, who's asked those questions and who's lived, right, this journey through their eyes. We're all humans at the end of the day, and we do carry it with us, whether we like it or not.
I just want to add to what Osama's saying is like that whole idea of being a journalist and telling those stories. I'm only able to recognize it now, years later. I've had 2 kids since then. I had no children when I was doing that. That trauma and maybe a pandemic also makes you reflect back on, wow, like there was nothing, like no one in the newsroom ever said, hey, are you okay? Like today it seemed like a heavy day. Like it was just, you got to keep going, you keep going. So you just actually take all that on, and I'd go home and, you unload on the ones closest to you and say, look, that was heavy and I just don't know why I'm crying so much and I can't stop thinking about this person's family story. Like, but there wasn't a recognition. I feel like in the last few years, media has had sort of an awakening and a bit of a reckoning as well with, how we sort of operate in this world. But it wasn't there in 2016. It was just keep going, keep going. But you are hearing people's life stories, and it's a huge responsibility, but their life stories have been so traumatic because of the way they've ended up here. It's not that they wanted to leave. Like people seem to forget that sometimes too. And it was like to constantly tell that story with such care. It felt like a lot of pressure, and I can reflect on it now, like looking back, but I was like, man, I think I should have seen a therapist during that time. Like, again, such a position of privilege to be able to recognize that now. But at the time, it was like, I got to do these stories justice. I am taking on their emotions, and I am like trying to tell that story and embody it the best that I can. But yeah, it was a lot.
It is definitely a lot. And I mean, myself, I did not have therapy either, after having worked with, again, doctors and social workers and, youth protection service agents, etc. And yeah, still until today, I hear very difficult stories, and we can't help but project our own, problems, etc. And try not to, but you do carry it with you. And one thing is for sure, I mean, I tend to like not bring problems with me at home. I just not talk about it. And it's not, maybe at the beginning you share some stories here and there because it's something new, but after a little while, you just want to keep it private. You just want to keep it to yourself. And unfortunately, it numbs you over time. It really does numb you. And that's what has the war in Syria has done, to me to a certain degree. Now it's been 10 years, 11 years, and it's always the same thing, right? And you can only take it so much, right? And there's on top of the macro events, you also have the micro events that you live as a human being. So there's only so much you can take. And I think it's very important to recognize that and to be gentle with ourselves, and maybe also organizations like such as the CBC, other broadcasters, and also other government programs also should be mindful of, the fact that those frontline workers also can experience PTSD to a certain degree, right? So it's I think it's there's a lot of room for discussion when it comes to that.
For the final question, Davey and I kind of wanted to reflect on the current media landscape. And we wanted to know what both your thoughts were about Canada's subsequent waves of newcomers coming, and particularly with the Afghan crisis that's happening now. What your thoughts are on the way that is being covered?
Yeah, just reflecting on the situation in Afghanistan and folks coming from there. Covered a little bit of it the last few months in the rare times I've been in the newsroom because I'm working a lot of my own stuff at home. But I don't know if the will is there to tell the stories the same way it was 4 or 5 years ago. Even trying to do a half-hour call-in segment, it's hard to get buy-in and get, even the phone ringing sometimes because it's also a pandemic now. And I feel like people are so caught up in their own lives that to push a story like that to the top of the news agenda, you'd have to have somebody in the newsroom fighting and saying, this is really important. And beyond the U.S. troops pulling out and major milestones, which we cover, in terms of Canada's role and all of that, I feel like we've failed. I feel like, where is the accountability for how long were we in Afghanistan as a country? And now, do we not have a moral obligation to help these people and to resettle them? And if journalists don't put that pressure on the government to continue telling the story and asking the questions after news conference after news conference, the government's only going to do things when they're really pushed and said, oh, well, the payout, like for them to do the story for the Syrian refugees, was that they got so much free publicity for months on end about how great Canada is. We've taken double the amount of this, you know what I mean, in terms of intake. And here it's like people are so, I think the climate is so different now politically, especially there was a middle of an election when this all happened as well. And so the will just isn't there. And also journalism is just so fragmented. 5 years ago, it was completely different, the media landscape. Now it's, newspapers, everything is like, it's much more fragmented in terms of people have shut down news businesses. Others have pulled together, and you'll have one radio station owned by the same TV company, owned by these newspapers. It's all the same. So there's not a lot of competition. So I think it's just, it's sad. And I wish that there was better and more frequent journalism on the whole situation. Because it's not like you can go and look for the stories if you want, but they're not on the front page as you think they should be.
Yeah, you said it all. This is Osema speaking. You said it all, Val. And I think the magic word here is COVID, right? COVID, and it looks like all the other, world pandemics. Not just talking about the health pandemic, but also I see war as being a pandemic as well. It has all been pushed aside. So it's no longer a sexy story, and the word sexy is something that we use in news, okay? It's a sexy story. It's often something that we hear. Now, yes, the Syrian refugees, that was a very sexy story, and I think we milked it to the max from all angles, and we still, less extent today, but it was milked above and beyond your imagination. Now, the Afghan refugee situation is, yes, you might see this picture from time to time where the little girl is getting off the plane with her parents and she's jumping with her balloons, etc., all excited. Yes, this is a sexy story. But aside from that, it was all pushed aside. And unfortunately, there's no tragedy that's more tragic than other, right? It all depends on our perspective, right? But again, COVID came and it's a global pandemic, and it just, everything else our lives was put on hold, right? And I guess, because we lived in a survival mode, right, for such, for almost a year and a half. So everyone was really focused on public health and on their own health, basically. So, you mentioned fatigue or people have become fatigued. True. And I think it's also a term that, here often is compassion fatigue. And I think people in philanthropy, they also see it, right? People maybe do not donate as much as they used to, or depending on which cause is more cause célèbre, as we say. They might donate more to certain causes than others, or they might have compassion towards certain causes than others. There's a story about these bloggers. I forgot what her name. It was all over the news. I didn't really follow, but it was all over the news. But one thing that I was wondering about is why this story, right? How many kids get killed and lost and disappear, etc., on much larger scale, but no one hears about them. So I think this is another debate that we always have in I guess journalistic community, right? What's off mic for sure. What makes a story more compelling than another, right? Why do we navigate towards this direction and not that direction? Why do we give more attention to, let's say, this family as opposed to that family? And I think this is what happens also in the world of media. We probably experienced it yourself, Val, with refugee with families that you've met. If one journalist meets a really interesting family, you have all the journalists from all broadcasters come and want to interview and get that story as well. And at the end of the day, that person would, the subject matter will give their interviews, etc., with all, pure heart. But at the end of the day, they're left with nothing. And all they want was maybe some help or some connections, you know what I'm saying, to get out of the situation. So it's an ongoing debate for sure, but But definitely the Afghan refugee situation did not get the same media coverage as the Syrian refugee one. That's for sure. And I think it's mainly due to, again, the fatigue and also due to COVID.
Thank you. Davey speaking. Those are such a meal of insights that you've both presented today, and on behalf of the Unscripted and the Frontliners team, thank you so much for your heart and your words and your amazing insights. So thank you both to you, Bao and Osama. Thank you so much.
Definitely, and thank you so much for so many insights. And I think, as Val has said, I think journalism has a shelf life, I would say, of 7 years. I don't know where I came up with this magical number, but there's like a 7 years. Like it's like after 7 years you do something else. But I think we all go down to the idea of being a storyteller, and I think both Zahida and Davey are also storytellers. Different type of storytellers, but at the end of the day, you know how to tell a story based on real life situations. Maybe you're more on a fictional side, or more on the real life, but everything is intertwined. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, and I think it's as long as you have the human being in mind, I think at the end of the day, this is what makes a good story, right? When you keep the human being in your mind.
That's wonderful. Okay, thank you both. And we're back live once again. This is Davey speaking. And we are almost to the end of our program tonight. But we have one last thing coming up. Before that starts, we're going to put the last question in the chat for you folks. We've heard from so many amazing people, Bal and Oyasayama, the scenes from Zahida's play, and seeing all those things, we leave this last question to you of what are you taking away with you after tonight's program? Again, what are you taking away with you after tonight's program?
Great question. And think of that as we end tonight with the second half of our interview with Gulalai Habib. So the final question that we had was how this play looks at some of the overlooked and untold aspects of the sector. And I was just wondering, what are some of the most important untold or overlooked stories in the sector for you, whether it was during this period of Syrian resettlement or in general from your many years on the...
I'm thrilled that this play that your team, you initiate. Really, this is very close to my heart. The cause is very close to our beliefs of the role of frontliners, because this play is definitely showing the interaction of the complex communication, intercultural communication between frontliners that play was showing, but also the hard work of frontliners behind the scene, working with systemic issues. I could just imagine in that place about housing. So newcomers come, and if they are under government-sponsored refugees, an average of $700 to $800 for everything. And then the frontliners were searching for housing within the first 7 to 10 days of newcomers' arrival. So housing, just imagine how it is for all of us. So the frontliners were really challenging multiple systemic barriers, multiple systemic issues, and things that were impossible for anybody. And again, a very hard job. Many frontliners were burned out with their caseload, with the stresses of their own journey of migration. Many were newcomers themselves. So the untold story behind is the life of frontliners, but also for me in the mid-level management, the systemic challenges that we noticed, that we were crushed between the need of refugees, the requirement and recommendation of frontliners, but at the same time, the disconnect with senior management. So the settlement sector in general it's a growing concern that we all have, is that senior management is not coming with lived experience. It wouldn't make the case. I mean, whatever the reality is on the ground, that disconnection exists. And that's why we are very much, that's my view, is my personal view from my work experience of these 22 years almost. That disconnect is really tough on the frontliners. And the way I see it more, it's somehow settlement became somebody with very good business mind is having a project, and the commodities are refugees and the frontliners who are running the show behind the scene. So that I think it's time that for the restructuring of the settlement sector, where lived experiences will be valued and considered at all levels of the organization. Without that, I think it's a failing model. Settlement itself is not a solution for the world displacement in a displaced population. We know that. Canada's role in displacement is critical. So there are, like, for example, at that time when you were the frontliners, there was no media attention to the work of frontliners. None of the frontliners were representing their work. Their work was represented by somebody at the senior management, sitting in Hawaii Beach or in Mexico Beach, talking to media, representing somebody else's hard effort in work.
So I know that part of the reason that you're so loved and respected by frontline workers in the sector is because you were part of voicing some of the uncomfortable truths that you touched on just now of the sector, and at a great cost to yourself. And I'm just wondering about how you're feeling about that restructuring and how it's been heard, and about the sector now.
Yeah, yes, for sure. I think definitely many of us were impacted. I believe all the frontline who were coming with lived experiences and really taking the heavy burden of serving newcomers along their own journey of migration and displacement were feeling burnt out and frustrated when their voices were not changing system, when the change was somehow, and when we realized that this was a deliberate, geniusly ill-designed system, that somebody is taking advantages of the energy and knowledge and experiences of newcomers. So this was a sad fact that we faced after many years of efforts. And I remember those efforts, we were internalized, and we will believe, oh, maybe I don't know the language. Let me frame it differently. Let me work on my own learning. But then we realized, no, this is a very well-designed system to take advantages of the newcomers' knowledge and experiences to run the show, basically. So I think at that time, particularly immediately after the Syrian refugees' arrival, where people's titles were changed, like the case managers who were absolutely doing the case management work by all standards. They were underpaid, their hours, their overtime was not paid. We have records of working up to 2 a.m., the frontliners. Their vacations were blocked. They were not allowed to take vacation from September to February. And then they had the 1 month fiscal year to rush. And many of the frontliners booked tickets to see their loved one. I remember there was one lady who booked a ticket because her father was very ill. She was not allowed to go. And then the father passed away. So this was not vacation. Usually it was not vacation. It was very much to visit your loved one back home, because many of us were refugees coming immediately to a new country, while the senior management absolutely had entitlement absolutely during the peak arrival of Syrian refugees, that they wouldn't miss that. Overtime payment was another issue, underpayment and taking people's titles and position. So it was a big disconnect. And for many of us, many were actually terminated, many were fired from the position, and some decided to leave because it was not worth it. And I think the departure has been a wake-up call for many of us. Your play was very much, it's just lovely. I really would very much encourage you and your team to have similar plays, because there were so many stories, so many untold stories of frontliners, so many interaction within that dynamic. But beyond that, there are so many changes that you made in people's life, each one of you. So I think it's a very, I'm thrilled to see this play, and I wish you all the success, and would love to have additional plays like this for our communities.
Thank you, absolutely. Thank you.
Davey speaking. What a great way to end tonight with that interview with Gulalai. And again, I would like to thank Gulalai and Bal and Oisaima for their wealth of knowledge and insight, and it's lots to think about. And thank you all as well for contributing to the answers to the last question, which was, what are things that you are going to take away from tonight's program? And we have comments like Heidi that says, I'm inspired to find out more about how the resettlement of current Afghan refugees is progressing. And that's actually really interesting, because I don't know if it's fully captured in the interview with Bal and Oisaima, but before we started that interview, and a little bit as well with Gulalai, we were talking about, like, right now, back in 2016, there was just so much coverage of that settlement project. And now we're, in a way, in another historic settlement project happening around the world. But because of, let's be honest, because of the pandemic, that's been, and other things, that's been taking a lot of, like, at least news and media attention, concentrated on those narratives of these newcomers who are also making their way to Canada right now. Like, do you want to talk a little bit about that, Zahida?
Absolutely. No, I think it's interesting because this moment that this play is about was so highly publicized. Like, it makes you think that we still have many refugee crises that are happening and that will happen. And so in many ways, like, the story is ongoing and it's ongoing and it's ongoing. But the media cycle, is also a thing at the same time. And so, I don't have too much to say about that, but except that the story is ongoing. Yeah.
And I think it's a reminder that not only the stories and the experiences of these folks that are coming to a place of refuge, to find refuge and settlements, and not of consent, but also the folks that have worked with not only the frontline workers, but journalists who are covering those stories, and cultural translators like Oisaima who are translating for people, and even people that were contributing in different ways through church support groups and things like that. Is we forget that we're all this community of people working together in order for us to welcome people to this community. And maybe there are differing perspectives about that, but at the end of the day, we're all just people trying to find comfortability and life and love and community together. And this play, in a way, also talks about that recurring cycle, that challenge to connect and despite all the differing things that happens.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a really beautiful note to end on.
Yeah. It's over to you, Zahida.
No, yeah. So we really want to thank you all for coming to Unscripted, the Frontliners. We appreciate everyone coming and spending your time with us for tonight's program.
And Davey speaking, and thank you to you, Zahida, for such a wonderful play. PTC is so lucky to have you. And as part of the New Play and Development Prize, we're so excited to see where it develops. And thank you to you for staying for this whole live stream and watching Unscripted, the Frontliners. I just want to say it's because of audiences and community members like you folks that helps get these stories from the page to the stage. And I just want to mention 2 ways that you can continue to support doing that after this live stream is done, especially with a project like the Frontliners. So the first thing to note is you'll receive an email right after this live stream is done, and it's a survey. And that survey is really important because it has some questions in there that will help Zahida with her next draft of her play for the Frontliners. And also there's questions from PTC to ensure that we're consistently making Unscripted the best type of event that we could present to you. And also second, we also are moving into a season of giving. So consider giving PTC artists your support through our current fundraiser, because our playwrights are the voices to translate the conversation into cohesive stories that resonate with the community around them. And as we have taken this big breath, this pause in theater for the last 2 years, PTC artists or just theater artists in general have been resilient in telling their stories. Currently, we're working with Zahida with the Frontliners. We're also working with playwrights just like Millie Mumford, Camila Sediego, Mercedes-Benz Marquez, and also Jose Toledoro. So these are all amazing artists that we're working with right now. And any way you could help support us is extremely helpful at the end of this year. So if you would like to give a donation, the link is in the description box of the YouTube Live that you're watching right now. So in the description box. And so the journey continues. Keep an eye out this new year for updates from the Frontliners as it makes its way to the stage this fall. And if you want any immediate updates about the project, you can sign up for our newsletter, which you can do through the survey or through our website. I'm Davey Samuel Calderon.
And I'm Zahida Rahemtulla.
Good night.
Cast: co-host and curator Zahida Rahemtulla. Co-host, director, and dramaturg Davey Samuel Calderon. Omar and interrupting journalist Mustafa Shaker. Yusuf, Minister McCallum and CBC Tom Pickett. Nadia, CBC Gisela, CBC Shelley, and CBC journalist Sabrina Villani. Speakers and consultants: Musqueam representative and activist Mary Point. Speakers: Bal Brach, Oysama Kanbare, Gulalai Habib. Consultants: Farouk Al-Samari, Majd Aga, Oysama Kanbare. Crew: Digital producer Maria Zarillo, sound designer Heather Kempsky, DOP and editor Gabriel Ordonez Cifuentes, workshop production coordinator Olivia Eddy, technical lead Jack Goodison, technical support Rachel Brew, chat moderator Andy Lloyd, audience service coordinator Kaylee Sandermersky, PTC staff Heidi Taylor, Belinda Bruce, Joanna Garfinkel, Melanie Yates. This was produced with the cooperation of UBCP ACTRA. Thank you. PTC would like to thank Canadian Heritage,
Canada Council for the Arts and BC Arts Council, and Gear-Based Camera Rentals. Special thanks to Jack Goodison for his original music for the pre-show and credit cards. We also acknowledge the financial support of the province of British Columbia. The Playwright gratefully acknowledges the support of the following people and institutions in the development of The Frontliners: Davey Calderon, PTC's New Play and Development Prize, BC Arts Council, Heidi Taylor, Joanna Garfunkel, Maria Zarilla, Belinda Bruce, Olivia Eddy, Silk Road Institute, Mercedes Baroque, Mohammed Shaheen, Mariam Zaidi, the 2019 Arts Club Emerging Playwrights Unit, Stephen Drover, Ashley Cochran, Bonnie Ma, Bronwyn Carradine, Millie Mumford, Scott Budden, Stratford Theatre Festival, Lizel Lafferty, Revolver Theatre Festival, Taylor Jansen, Ottawa Little Theatre, Theatre BC, Woden Literary Prize, and Playwrights Guild of Canada Emerging Playwright Award. PTC acknowledges the sovereignty of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, on whose traditional, unceded, and occupied territories we live and work.